Chapter 1928, Immortal Demon Child. The holy sword of judgment, with its eternal flame, tilted its power to make the light last forever and purify the world with intense fire. With a swing of his sword, a raging sea of golden flames appeared, turning into a torrent that surrounded a crow of doom. The flames formed a huge vortex that completely enveloped it, then began to burn mercilessly. The crow of doom's eyes were cold as ice, and he raised the demon-swallowing spear in his hand and began to absorb this power. However, the moment the spear touched the eternal flame, it was like dry kindling hitting a raging fire, and with a whoosh, it ignited. A look of surprise flashed across the crow of doom's eyes. His demon-devouring spear could absorb supernatural powers, but Olive's power came from his most devout faith, which was a holy power that could destroy all demons. Everything attached to the flames would be burned to ashes, especially the power of the dark demons, which was its favorite fuel. Whoosh! The flames climbed up the spear and directly onto his body, beginning to burn him mercilessly. Caw, caw! People could clearly hear the mournful cries coming from the mouths of the crows of doom. Zhang Yi silently thought to himself, no wonder the Holy Sea has the confidence to lead this operation. Like the Aoshi clan, they possess ancient powers that have been passed down for generations, specifically to deal with these followers of the Drucker gods. He couldn't help but think that in the history of this planet, apart from the first generation of humans who died out early due to their failures, every subsequent generation of humans had to go through a process of fighting the Drucker gods. Faced with a race that possessed the vitality that even the gods feared, infinite evolution, and became stronger and stronger as time went on, to the point where they couldn't even be completely killed, future generations would become increasingly desperate. From the Yihen tribe to the Arks, to the Ecuadorians, and then to their sixth generation of humans, no one could escape this fate. Therefore, each generation would have its own method to seal away the Drucker gods and their followers who possessed their power. Is the power that my ancestors in the Huashu kingdom relied on the mysterious art of the Seven Gates? Zhang Yi couldn't help but wonder. However, he felt a great sense of regret because most of the ancient culture of the Huashu kingdom had disappeared in the long river of history and, for various reasons, had not been preserved. Even someone as intelligent as Yang Xinxin could only study the fragments of history and gain a little knowledge. This was truly a great pity. But now was not the time for regrets. They must continue to fight. Zhang Yi faced a crow of doom and directly transformed the divine refinement in his hand into a long chain, which he swung from his hand and threw at it. If it couldn't be killed, then killing it was meaningless. He wanted to try to drag a crow of doom into his dimensional space. The crow of doom saw the chain coming and immediately raised its spear to parry. But just as the chain touched the black spear, it suddenly blossomed like a flower. The long chain rattled, and hundreds of thousands of black branches extended from it, densely covering the space around the crow of doom in an instant. The density of the chain branches was enough to make someone with trypophobia faint. The space within a radius of several thousand meters was completely filled, and even the other mutants had to make room for Zhang Yi. A large number of crow soldiers were directly crushed to death by the dense chains. The source of divine refinement was the Green Knight, Bowser. Bowser was not a mutant with strong fighting power, but he possessed the most powerful life force, which meant that after his death, his corpse became an excellent weapon. Now, almost all of his components had been replaced by Liu Karen, but the core of his sword in the tree remained. Therefore, as long as it was continuously supplied with energy, it could continue to grow. As a result, in an instant, it formed a huge cage. The cage was tough, sharp, and infinitely regenerative, covered with spikes that the crow of doom couldn't break through no matter how hard it chopped at it. Layers upon layers of dense metal vines formed a spectacular giant black metal sphere in midair, with Zhang Yi's right hand as its root. It was as if it had grown in midair, completely blocking out the sky. Ping 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 ping. The crow of doom's gun was extremely fast, but as an ability user with enhancement-type abilities, he was more like a powerful military commander without any wide-range attack methods. With each strike, he could cut through thousands of metal vines, so Zhang Yi let divine refinement regenerate tens of thousands of metal vines. Therefore, the metal ball grew larger and larger and continued to squeeze towards the center. Whoosh! One after another, the metal vines turned into sharp swords and shot toward the Crow of Doom from all angles. The Crow of Doom was very fast, and he used every part of his body as a weapon to defend against these attacks. However, Zhang Yi's goal was never to destroy his body. In less than a minute, he was completely enveloped by huge metal vines. Even with his powerful strength, he couldn't do anything against the flexible divine refinement. Because at this moment, the material of divine refinement was no longer e-metal. It was a fusion of the highest level materials of the mechanical civilization, the weapon of the six-winged sovereign, Ichigard. Come in here. Zhang Yi suddenly exerted his strength and pulled the huge metal ball towards him. At the same time, a dimensional gate had already been prepared for him. Boom! 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 The Crow of Doom violently attacked the surrounding barriers, but to no avail. The metal ball only looked like it had bulged out, but it was not broken. A few seconds later, the metal ball fell into Zhang Yi's dimensional space with thunderous force. He closed the dimensional gate and retrieved the divine refinement. He had successfully sealed the Crow of Doom. This scene shocked the mutants present. If Olive's success was aided by religious artifacts and the power of faith, Zhang Yi, on the other hand, relied entirely on his own strength to seal a Crow of Doom by himself. Even the proud Odin god of war looked at Zhang Yi with a hint of awe in his eyes. In the Ural region, he had always regarded King Arthur as his most powerful opponent. But the news of King Arthur's defeat had spread throughout the world not long ago, and at first, Odin found it hard to believe. However, after spending a short time with Zhang Yi, he had no choice but to believe it. This guy was terrifyingly strong. The key was that he had too many cards up his sleeve and an endless supply of tricks. Zhang Yi successfully sealed one of the Crow of Doom's clones, but before he could breathe a sigh of relief, the Crow of Doom that Sharon and the others were trying to seal had split again. This time, 10 Crows of Doom appeared before everyone. Their aura was even more powerful than before. This time, even Odin's eternal spear couldn't penetrate the defense of a single Crow of Doom. Their hearts began to sink. If this continued, there would never be an end. Kangda's voice rang in Zhang Yi's ears again. "Old Zhang, let's run away. We'll never win if we continue like this." Zhang Yi narrowed his eyes. He knew that Kangda was right. The Drucker gods were the Drucker gods. Even a mighty god-level civilization couldn't completely destroy them. Even in a severely wounded and dormant state, his illusory incarnation was still terrifying. 10 huge Crows of Doom surrounded everyone, while Liang Yu and the others continued to fight against the army of crows. The Angel of the Sun, Middelin, and Deng Shintong were enchanting everyone, as this was the only way to destroy the Nether Walkers' bodies. However, in the darkness, the number of Nether Walkers was increasing. "We have to get out of here." Zhang Yi said. "Sharon, which direction should we go?" Sharon confirmed their approximate location, but due to the vastness of the area, their maps were shrouded in a thick fog. However, they could vaguely confirm that they were currently in a long canyon. "Move forward in the direction of 10 o'clock. Zhang Yi nodded. "Okay, let's leave immediately and gather the battle formation. Everyone, get ready to follow me out of here." Zhang Yi shouted loudly. The men from all departments immediately began to retreat, no longer fighting those monsters that were difficult to kill. Clang, clang. Clang, clang. Clang, clang. In the darkness, red lights flashed. They were the eyes of the Crow soldiers. They were clad in armor and advancing toward them in an orderly formation. The power of a military formation does not rely on the strength of individuals, but on the overwhelming pressure brought by a large army of undead soldiers. At first, it seemed that they had a chance to destroy them, but the further they went, the more desperate they became. All the mutants felt a deep sense of fear and hurriedly retreated to Zhang Yi's side. Zhang Yi cleared a path for them and allowed them to enter the protection of everything under heaven. But just at that moment, something unexpected happened. The water in the pond beneath their feet suddenly rose high, and a loud cry of a baby came from afar. "Wah! This was followed by a heavy, huge roar. Boom! Not far from Zhang Yi and the others, a huge shadow rose high from beneath the pool and quickly grew to dozens of meters high. Deng Shintong put his hands together and unleashed his supernatural energy, causing his long silver hair to fly in the wind. He fought with the darkness for space, trying to see clearly everything in front of him. The power of the heavenly Tao Star also affected the Nether Walkers, causing them to hesitate in their advance. They finally saw what the tall, bulging thing was. A huge, gray baby, as if crawling out of its mother's womb, covered in sticky liquid, crawled out of the pool. It lay on the ground, its head facing Zhang Yi and the others. Its head was more than 10 meters high and was a dead gray color, and its pupils were completely black, looking extremely strange. The second lord of the Netherworld, the immortal demon child, had appeared. A feeling of despair enveloped everyone's hearts. One lord of the Netherworld was already so difficult to deal with, let alone another one? Wah! The immortal demon child suddenly let out an even louder cry, and then Zhang Yi and the others heard a rustling sound coming from afar. The water surface shook violently, and one after another, small monsters with hideous appearances emerged from beneath the surface. They were gray and lifeless, looking somewhat like humans, but also like wild dogs. They had no hair on their bodies, and their eyes had degenerated from being in the dark for so long, but they had huge mouths full of fangs. SSSHHHH. SSSHHHH. They crawled out of the pool and moved toward the immortal demon child at an incredible speed, making rustling sounds in all directions. When he looked up, he saw that the top of the rock wall was also covered with these ugly and strange creatures. Seeing them, Zhang Yi suddenly thought of the charred corpse that the Aoshi clan had brought out earlier. At that time, everyone thought it was the corpse of a wild dog, but now that he thought about it, wasn't it exactly these gray, strange creatures? Clatter. The Nether Walkers fell from above like dumplings, howling and fearlessly rushing towards everyone. Zhang Yi's everything under heaven protected everyone, so they were not afraid. After a large number of Nether Walkers fell into the dimensional gate, Zhang Yi used his abilities to set it ablaze with a raging fire. The Nether Walkers inside the gate let out miserable cries of pain, but their bodies were like steel and could not be destroyed. Zhang Yi didn't bother with them for the time being. They couldn't affect the stability of the dimensional space inside the dimensional gate anyway, so he would put them away first and deal with them all at once later. Even though these Nether Walkers were nothing but skeletons wrapped in gray skin, their bodies were incredibly tough. Odibio said nothing, only letting his tribesmen take a Nether Walker's corpse out of the cloth bag, then pulling out a white bone dagger and stabbing it fiercely into the top of its skull. He was casting a shaman spell. The mantis opened its mouth wide and spat a large mouthful of thick green phlegm onto the Nether Walker's corpse, and a curse rang out. The large number of Nether Walkers around them seemed to have been attacked, covering their heads and letting out miserable cries. Even so, many of them still rushed forward fearlessly. At this time, many human troops had not yet returned to the range of everything under heaven and were intercepted by the Nether Walkers that had fallen from the sky. Their attack method was extremely disgusting. With their monkey-like, agile, and dry bodies, they pounced directly on the mutants. Once they succeeded, they would not let go even if it meant death. Then, they would open their big mouths full of fangs, which could fit a human head, and bite down hard on the mutants' bodies. Pfft. The combat suits made with cutting-edge human technology were like cardboard in front of their fangs and couldn't stop them at all. In an instant, cries of pain rang out as the mutants bit huge holes in the waists of the human warriors. Some warriors were unable to dodge in time and were targeted by a dozen Nether Walkers at the same time. After slashing and sweeping away several of them, they were attacked from behind by a cunning Nether Walker who bit off their heads with a crunch. Their fighting power might not be as strong as the Crow soldiers, but they were clearly more than 10 times as numerous. Zhang Yi and the others' ears were filled with the chirping roars. In an instant, more than a dozen warriors were bitten to death or injured by these little Nether Walkers due to being outnumbered. Fortunately, with the addition of high-level fighters such as Liang Yu and Uncle Yu, they quickly took action and killed a large number of Nether Walkers nearby, ensuring that all the warriors could enter the realm of everything under heaven. Boom! The dead baby-like creature rolled over on the water pool. It just lay there, staring intently at Zhang Yi and the others. Suddenly, it opened its mouth and revealed an ugly smile. Wah! A terrifying black wave of energy was released from its mouth, heading straight for Zhang Yi's everything under heaven. At the same time, the crows of doom also began to attack, emitting eerie sound waves from their mouths. Even Zhang Yi couldn't defend against the attacks of two lords of the netherworld with everything under heaven at a time like this. But of course, the others would not sit idly by and watch this happen. With tacit understanding, they began to launch a counterattack. Everything under heaven was a one-way passage, so attacks from the inside would not be affected. Odin rode on the eight-winged Pegasus, condensing the thunder in his hand into a huge spear more than 3 meters long. He aimed the eternal spear at a crow of doom in front of him and threw it with all his might. The spear, wrapped in thunder, forced the crow of doom to focus all its attention on it, because there was no way it could miss. Olive and the others also used their own skills. Even in such a dangerous situation, they were still able to remain calm. This was because all of the mutants who had come today had experienced countless dangers and fought their way out of a sea of corpses and blood. Olive, Saladin, and the others were not idle either. The holy flames burned fiercely, and black shadow blades broke through the air, blocking the immortal demon child's attacks. However, even with the two of them working together, they were quickly at a disadvantage. The immortal demon child's energy attacks were much stronger than those of the crow of doom. Fortunately, there were still a large number of mutant warriors following behind them. The two angels of the sun and moon joined forces, and the holy sword burst forth with the brilliance of the sun and moon, flying into the sky to join forces with the two bishop-level warriors against the enemy. As deputy captains of the Knights Templar, the two of them were also very powerful, both close to bishop level. Saladin's subordinate, hiss. A cold hiss came from the side. It was an irritated voice, but it sounded very unfamiliar. Zhang Yi glanced to the side and was suddenly startled to discover a strange face in the crowd. It was a woman, shrouded in a black hooded robe, with only her sharp chin and bright red lips visible. Zhang Yi did not remember there being such a person in the crowd. She raised her hands, which were slender and long, but as pale as white bones, with bright red nails that looked like human blood. The night is falling. The words came out of her mouth, and in the next moment, the whole world seemed to be plunged into endless darkness. The light disappeared completely. However, the light in front of Zhang Yi and everyone else only disappeared for a moment, and then they could see everything around them clearly. The darkness of the sealed land was no longer a problem for them, and they could see all the Nether Walkers. On the contrary, the Nether Walkers were thrown into chaos. The crow soldiers looked around in confusion, like blind men. Who are you? Not far from the woman, Andre asked in surprise, looking at her with a hint of caution. Even though they knew she should be a member of the human coalition, her sudden appearance still gave them an uneasy feeling. Me? She smiled coldly. I am Nyx, the goddess of night. Goddess of night? Everyone present looked thoughtful. They had never heard of such a figure in the mutant world. However, Cardalus and Canelo were not too far away from her, and the look in their eyes was clearly a little helpless. She's one of us. How should I put it? She's Sharon. After hearing this, everyone noticed that Sharon had disappeared. He had turned into a woman? Looking at her figure and half of her face, the transformation was complete. It wasn't a case of two people sharing the same body, but a complete change in appearance. No one knew the specific circumstances of Sharon or Nyx. After all, information about mutants was classified. The crowd didn't ask any more questions. Nyx could control the night, allowing them to see clearly in the darkness, which was a huge improvement for everyone. Liang Yu raised the long sword in her hand and took the opportunity to unleash a series of sharp black sword beams, instantly cutting down a large number of crow soldiers who were unable to dodge in time. Shah, in the sky, the little demons were not affected by the loss of light and continued their attack. Dark night. Nyx flipped her palm, and in an instant, the surrounding space became sticky. In the darkness, it was as if some strange substance had appeared, like a swamp, making it extremely difficult to move, even if one fell from the sky. Nyx crossed her hands, spreading her pale fingers wide apart, and the sound of her knuckles could be heard. Nightmare! A sharp wind swept through the air, followed by a series of shrill cries. The little demons' bodies fell from the sky, their bodies covered with clean cuts. Saladin had also blended into the darkness and began mercilessly reaping the lives of the little demons. The immortal demon child's eyes lost focus, and it couldn't see anything, so its cries became even louder. Wah! Wah! Its fleshy arms supported it on the ground as it struggled to lift its upper body, then it opened its mouth wide and launched indiscriminate energy attacks at its surroundings. The terrifying energy waves caused everything under heaven to begin to shatter, breaking into layers. It raised its right hand, and its zombie-like green arm swung wildly around it, landing a punch right where Zhang Yi and the others were. A thick death aura instantly enveloped the surrounding space, incredibly sticky and cold, as if a cold poisonous snake had wrapped itself around their bodies. Boom! The huge arm slammed down mercilessly, actually smashing a huge hole in everything under heaven's defense.